The war room at Forward Operating Base Harkin smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. Shh. Specialist Dara Wynne had been posted at the colonel's elbow for 6 days straight. Long enough to know that the base was coming apart at the seams. The permanent commander, Colonel Pierce, had been medevaced to Ramstein on a Tuesday with a ruptured appendix, and in the vacuum he left behind, Colonel Bryce Alderman had planted himself at the head of the operations table, like a man who had been waiting his whole career for exactly this moment. Maybe he had. Wynne wasn't paid to have opinions about that. She was paid to keep his coffee warm and his calendar current, and she did both without complaint. It was the woman she couldn't stop watching. She had appeared at the base's front gate that Thursday morning, cleared through security with a standard logistics credential, and spent the next 4 hours moving through Fob Harkin with a plain green clipboard and a vest that read Installation Review, Army in block letters across the back. She was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that measured everything in a room before she said a word. She had sat in on the morning brief without speaking. She had walked the motor pool, the armory, the communications annex, and the aid station, making notes in a small notebook with a mechanical pencil. She had asked 3 questions the entire morning, each one quiet and precise, each one answered by a staff sergeant who seemed oddly careful about how he worded his reply. Wynne had noticed that. The sergeants noticed her the way you notice weather. Colonel Alderman had not noticed her at all. Not until 11:30, when she walked through the war room door with her clipboard and took a position near the back wall and simply stood there, reading something she'd written down. Alderman looked up from the operations map. He looked at her vest. He looked at her clipboard. Then he looked at Wynne in a way that meant, "Whose problem is this? Who authorized a logistics review during an active command vacancy?" he said. Not to her, to the room. No one answered immediately. The S3 found something interesting on his tablet. The comms sergeant studied his headset. Alderman pushed back from the table. Who put her in charge of anything inside this wire? The woman looked up from her clipboard. She did not appear startled. She did not appear embarrassed. She looked at Colonel Alderman the way a person looks at a road sign, reading it, deciding if it's accurate, moving on. "I'm conducting a scheduled installation review," she said. Her voice was level, not loud. "I have the authorization paperwork if you'd like to see it." "What I'd like," Alderman said, "is to know why a logistics runner is standing in my war room during a command brief." He turned to Wynne. "Find out who cleared her through the gate and get me a name." Wynne reached for her radio. The woman with the clipboard watched this without expression and made a small note on her pad. That was the moment, Wynne would later think, when she should have understood something was wrong. Or rather, that something was about to go very right, in a way no one in that room was prepared for. The communications grid failed at 11:47. It didn't fade. It didn't stutter. It went from full traffic to nothing in under 4 seconds. And the silence it left behind was the kind that made trained soldiers look at each other. Across a table, the primary relay was down. The secondary was routing nowhere. Harkin was an island. Alderman was on his feet. His S6 was already on the landline to the signal detachment. The S3 was pulling up contingency protocols on a laptop that couldn't reach anything outside the local network. 3 different voices competed for the same airspace in the room. The woman set her clipboard on the back table, smoothed it flat with one hand, and walked to the communications console. She didn't push anyone aside. She waited 2 seconds for the comms sergeant to step back from the console, and when he did, and Wynne noticed that he did step back, without being asked, as if some trained instinct had engaged, she sat down and pulled the headset on. "Harkin Actual, this is Coldframe," she said, in a voice so calm it cut straight through the noise in the room. Request emergency relay to theater comms. Authorization Coldframe 749er Delta 6. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of communication failure. Quiet of people who have just heard something they were not expecting. The comms sergeant's face had changed. Wynne watched it happen. A slow rearrangement, like a man doing arithmetic and arriving at an answer he didn't think was possible. He leaned forward and looked at the console readout. He looked at the woman. He looked at the readout again. Theater comms answered in 11 seconds. She spoke for 90 seconds. quiet and unhurried, delivering grid coordinates, status codes, and a logistics assessment that covered every system on the base in sequence. The motor pool, the armory, the aid station, the comms annex, as if she had spent the morning cataloging them, because she had. When she pulled the headset off and stood, the war room screen behind the operations table had come back to life. But it wasn't showing the operations map anymore. It was showing a file, a sealed Army personnel file, auto-populated when the command code hit theater comms and unlocked the review protocol. The name at the top read, Callaway Mara E. Below it, 2-star insignia, U.S. Army, AG-34. Below that in the summary field, youngest woman to attain general officer rank in Army history. 2 combat deployments. Joint Special Operations Command Commendation. Installation Review Authority, unrestricted. Call sign, cold frame. Win read it twice. Her radio was still in her hand. At the back of the operations table, General Mara Callaway reached up to the collar of her logistics vest and folded it back. The 2 stars on her collar were small, dull-finished, and unmistakable. She had been wearing them all morning. The senior NCO in the room, Sergeant Major Delos, came to his feet first. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The call to attention carried in the straightening of his spine, and every soldier in the room read it the same way and rose. Every officer at the table stood, the S3, the S6, the aide near the door. They rose the way men rise when the floor has shifted under them, and standing is the only honest response. Colonel Alderman stood last. His face had gone the color of old concrete. Not red, not pale, just flat and still. The color of a man who has reviewed the last 20 minutes and cannot find a single moment to reclaim. He stood, and he rendered the salute, and he held it. General Callaway looked at him for a moment without particular emotion. Then she returned the salute, clean and unhurried, and reached for her clipboard. "I'll have the full installation assessment on your desk by 1600, she said, and a recommendation to Theater Command on the command vacancy structure. She paused, and something in her expression shifted. Not warm, not cold, exact. The way a level is exact when it tells you what true. Get your comms redundancy rebuilt by end of week, Colonel. The relay shouldn't have been a single point of failure." She picked up the clipboard, made one more note with the mechanical pencil, and walked to the door. The room stayed standing until she was through it. Wynne lowered her radio. She was aware distantly she had never keyed it. That she had never found the name of the gate guard who had cleared the logistics runner through, because there had been no logistics runner. Only a general officer who had walked through the front gate of a broken base and spent a morning learning everything she needed to know before she said a single word that mattered. Outside the wire, somewhere to the north, the dust was settling on a base that was still standing, not because it had been ordered to stand, because the woman with the clipboard had made certain of it, quietly, before anyone in that room had thought to ask her name. Sergeant Major Delos was still at the head of the table when Wynne finally looked back. He had not sat down. He was looking at the door. After a moment, he reached up and removed his cover and held it against his chest, and did not say anything for a long time. Some things, Wynne thought, did not require words. Some things were simply true, the way the level tells you, and the only honest thing left was to stand still and know it.